Welcome back to another episode of Pursuit of Purpose. I want to tell you, everybody, thank you for joining us again. I'm Robbie, and this is
Chuck Olaf.
And we have with us today a very special guest, someone that's very near and dear to my heart. She's one of the most precious people in the world, if not the most important person in the world to me. It's my wife, Denise Martin. Thank you for joining us today. And if you wouldn't mind, kind of give your own introduction and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, thank you for having me. I am a mom, a wife, a grandparent recently, a teacher, and I'm also a survivor.
You are a survivor. You are a survivor. Now, that's actually one of the things that we have you here to talk about. But even more so than that, I see you as a very empowered woman who has mastered the art of reinvention of yourself. And I brought you here as an example of true female empowerment. So
Thank you.
I didn't prepare you for that ahead of time, but that's your purpose for being here today, and I thank you for that. So if you wouldn't mind, give a little backstory about Denise Martin. Where did you come from, and how did you get here?
Well, that's a long story.
We've got lots of time.
I came from not the best circumstances, not the best childhood, but I always say that what they were kind of shaped me into what I am now.
How was your childhood? Can you go into a little bit of detail? You don't have to go into too many specifics if it's uncomfortable, but a little bit, just to give you a little bit of foundation so people understand what you mean by a rough childhood. There's a lot of people out there with a rough childhood, and you personally probably haven't experienced some of this stuff. There can be a bit of shame associated with that, and you don't possess shame about your childhood. I know from personal experience. So if you wouldn't mind, kind of share that background.
It was just, I was an only child, and I was the child of two addicts, and I kind of got lost in the shuffle a lot, and I feel like I raised myself in a lot of ways. But like I said before, it kind of shaped who I am.
Absolutely.
So I don't have any, I've dealt with my childhood trauma and all those kind of things, so I don't have, it doesn't define me anymore. It doesn't tell me who I am anymore. It just is a part of my life now.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So when you say you were the child of addicts, did you know they were addicts when you were children? When you were a child, I mean?
No. I mean, I didn't know what that was. I just knew, I saw what they did. And for a long time, I thought that's just how people were.
Sure.
And then as I got older and I was around different types of people and at different friends' house and stuff, I saw that maybe my home life wasn't exactly normal.
At a minimum, it was different, huh?
Yes.
When you say you saw what they did, what do you mean by
Well,
that?
I mean, just, I saw drugs and drinking and just things I know now that a child should never see or experience because I didn't understand it. I just, like I said, I thought it was just how people lived.
Right.
And I realized as I grew up that it was not a normal childhood at all.
Right. That's a very common thing as a therapist. People will come in and we don't get away from our origin, our home, if you will, too often. And that's usually pretty guided. And it's not until we start going into other people's homes,
Yes.
like we go home after some sport practice or we go spend the night with someone and then that's when people typically tell me, like, I didn't know other people lived like that.
Right.
And then I go home, and then it starts like I call it the storm effect.
Mm-hmm.
If we think about, like, say this time of year, definitely in the spring, you have the warm air that's been, or the cold air, I should say, that's been on top of us, and now all of a sudden this warm air is coming in, and that's where the storm is.
Right.
And that's usually when people start making changes in their life.
Right.
But it's so slow and slight, and then that change is compared to, and it's not uncommon, especially for a child growing up with people who had substance abuse and other things, is developing kind of a care for others.
Right.
Because you see them in such careless situations.
Yes,
and I presume that may have been something in your world, because I hear it a lot in
Yes.
the other counseling folks.
Yes. And I know something for me when I was younger is I would stay with my grandmother in the summers. And that's when I started realizing that my life at home was so different from my life at my grandma's house. And that's really when I started noticing that I didn't know that it was dysfunctional at the time, but looking back now, it was very dysfunctional.
Right. So, kind of moving forward a little bit, when you were becoming aware. Now you're going to. I presume you're in a public school, so you're in an opportunity, a situation where there's opportunity. Did you find yourself being more of a joiner and getting into things, or were you maybe because of that particular home life, I found that I protected it and didn't? Which way did you kind of go?
I was probably a joiner. Like I was lucky in that school was easy for me, and so even if I didn't try hard, I still made good grades. So that was a blessing that I had, and I also didn't care. Like my friends would make fun of me because I would get straight A's without trying, and I just didn't care. I'm like, it's just, I enjoyed school. I loved being there, and I think I found it as an escape from home life. And so I kind of immersed myself in it. Like I was in FFA, and I did like parliamentary procedure in FFA. And it's so funny because I would never see myself doing that, but it's like I found my way in high school doing that and learned how to become a leader and like just immerse myself in that little bubble, and I loved it.
That's really interesting. I think all of us look for competition somewhere, and it could be in a class. Like I want to.
It was a competition that we would go to.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and like I said, it could be. Okay, I'm gonna do well on this test, but to actually become a leader of the parliamentary, which is a debate type thing,
Right?
And that's impressive. And so there was a fire inside of there. And interestingly enough, we talked a lot about being attracted to opportunities, and something inside of you was attracted to that.
I was definitely attracted
as a way to grow. Yes. Yeah. Well, that's really impressive. Now, after you share with our audience, knowing a little bit more about what you had to go back to and process. So having these juxtaposed worlds. Probably, like you implied earlier, and Rob even in his introduction, promoted the overcoming. I became an overcomer.
I didn't know it, but yes, something inside of me had that, and that life in high school, that immersing myself in that allowed me to have a different world, I guess.
Yeah, quite the divine guidance, as we like to say. Yeah.
Now, amazingly enough, in your experience, and you'll have to forgive me a little bit because I have so much personal knowledge of a lot of your life. So some of these questions may take you a little off, but if you would, I also know that you went through some other experiences in your childhood that a lot of other people, and especially women, can relate to. You experienced some abuse, and that impacted you in certain ways. Would you mind talking about that? You don't have to go into great detail about what happened, where, when, who, but how it affected you. What changed in you and from you through that?
Yeah, when I was younger, I probably was neglected a little bit. I didn't really suffer any kind of physical abuse. I did suffer sexual abuse, and at the time, I didn't really understand it, and I really just was shameful about it, and I thought that it was my fault. But I feel like I was not supervised very well, and so I was put in situations where I was left alone with people I probably shouldn't have been left alone with. And so that was something I experienced in my childhood.
Okay. So how did you get past the shame? How did you get, what were the steps for you? Can you remember any of that?
Well, it took me a lot of years because at first I just kind of stuffed it and didn't deal with it and never talked about it. And I didn't realize that it had happened to so many people. And so I just kind of pretended like it didn't happen for so many years. And that was very toxic. Like it made me make decisions that I don't think were the best decisions when I was a teenager. Like, I thought that what I thought was love or attention, I think was shaped by being abused as a child. Like I looked at attention the wrong kind of ways, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. And I think that's going to help a lot of listeners when they hear you say it.
I didn't know it at the time.
Description.
That's what I was doing.
Right.
Like I had no idea until probably I got close to my 30s that that's what was going on.
Right.
Like something in my childhood was affecting how I was in relationships as a teenager and young adult.
Sure. So we had these experiences that were promoting those types of decisions. We'll call them when you're less mature years. You know?
Right.
Yeah, because at some point maturity did catch up with itself, and you were obviously able to perceive things better and respond to things better. Was there any language of, say, like self-talk or self-challenge? People may even use words like self-forgiveness, or to say, I'm going to release myself of that because I'm not that person anymore. And I ask that. I hope that's not too complicated, because I know there's folks listening that are like, yeah, I was that, or may still be that, because we do have young people who listen, and they're still in that. They want to come out of it, but maybe they don't quite know how. And first, they don't know how to see themselves, then how to see the opportunity. Maybe you can speak to that.
Well, it's hard to say. I can say I started maturing. I had a child when I was 21, and she had a really bad birth injury, and she had cerebral palsy. And so I learned to mature faster than I thought possible, because I did have a child that was special needs and she needed extra help. But I don't think I developed the language until I was in my master's program, and not because I was in a master's program, but because I started talking about it. They want you to talk about it. So you start talking about it, and they start asking you, well, how do you think you survived this? How do you think you overcame this? They're asking you all these questions, and you try to like kind of push it away and like, I don't know. And they don't accept, I don't know. It's like, no, how did you get here? Right. So that's when I started developing the language of, the self-forgiveness, like you said, or those things were not my fault. I was a child. Right. I was a child less than 10 years old. Right. I didn't have the mental capacity to make those decisions, or for it to be my fault, the things that happened to me.
Right.
And so I started seeing it in a different way, like as being a survivor instead of a victim.
That happens often in therapy when folks come in. And we have to kind of set the scene a little bit. Sometimes I'll even mess with the shades and the lighting just so they can go back. And I might even use like a pillow, and I'll say, okay, we're going to let that be your 6 or 8 or 10-year-old self. Talk to them. Right. It's almost like the courses you were in kind of forced me to go back and talk to her.
Right.
And say, hey, it wasn't your fault.
And I'm not, you don't need the courses. You don't need to be in a master's program to do it. It's just, I was kind of forced to do it there. Right. But you would be amazed at how much just talking about it and hearing someone else tell you that's not your fault, or, you know what I mean?
Yes,
like just hearing someone else's perspective on it, and you realize how skewed your thoughts were about it.
It's like a permission.
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. So, you had your daughter at 21 with her needs, and you say it's almost like it I don't want to say woke up some things inside of you, but definitely things came out quickly, like these maturities. It's like came out quickly.
I matured really fast. I went from being not so mature, at 19 and 20 to immediately as soon as my daughter was born. I'd never driven downtown in Houston before she was born, and then when she was born, I had to learn to do that. I had to just things that I'd never done.
Yes.
That immediately I had to become more mature. And
yeah, we I know in life we try to, at least definitely in our particular business in Pursuit of Purpose, we push people toward going after their wants, because that's when they're on all their energy and all that. Right. But it doesn't take us away from, there are some have tos. You said, yes. I had to.
Yes.
There was no other way it was going to get done. And that is impressive. And I know that folks listening are very impressed to say, I get that, ma'am. But that was the have tos and must be done.
Right.
There was no other way to get it done. But looking back, we could say with evidence, yes, I did it. Did you believe in yourself, or did you just push through? And as our friend,
probably not in the beginning.
Yes.
Probably not in the beginning. It was more survival and just surviving, just doing what I needed to do to survive, and looking at it one day at a time, because if I didn't, it would be too overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't think about the what ifs or what's going to happen, or just day by day what I need to do. And it just kept building and building. And before I knew, I was doing it like a pro.
Yes, yeah, I mastered it.
Yeah, exactly. And I
Yes.
don't even know how I got there, but just one day at a time.
We have a recent guest on one of our shows, Chris Alexis, and he somewhere toward the end of his show, his particular interview, he talked about the herd of buffalo running into the storm, and
Yes.
the quickest way to get through it to better places is just to run toward it, not run from it. And I think you just gave us an example of that. I hope you guys are listening, and please check out Chris's interview because that's an excellent description of how to make it happen.
Well, one thing that she did, just to put it into perspective, she was in a crucial developmental stage of her life. She says pre 10 years old when this abuse occurred. She carried that with her through her adolescence, teen years, through high school, into college, into her first relationship, and into her college, studies, and then having the birth of your first child being a special needs birth and requiring so much of you. There came a time where there was a need to unloose part of that burden.
Right.
Because you were needing to carry a different burden.
Right.
And you wanted to carry a different burden. So there became this inner desire. Is what it sounds like to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like maybe there was this new desire to replace that old pain.
Right. There was no room for it anymore.
There
was no room for it anymore. I had to move on. I wanted to try to make sure that Taylor could be, had every opportunity there was, and there was no time for that anymore. There was just like running into the storm, like you said. We're going.
We're going. It's I don't know, the word that comes to mind is kind of a prioritizing effect.
Right.
Like maybe up until the birth of Taylor, my priorities just by default was the only thing I knew, which was this life up until this point, and then all of a sudden there became this kind of like a shift, like a paradigm shift in your life. Say, okay, well that really no longer has immediate significance.
I don't know what my priority was before her. I was just kind of like wandering around in life. I was in college, but I wasn't doing well in college,
right.
Like at least not to my standards. And then she came, and it's like all that just changed.
Right.
Well, does it sound possible, and help me understand, but is it possible that up until Taylor, you were living a life basically of reaction?
Yeah.
You were sort of going through life reacting to your environment and to the people in it. And then when Taylor came along, you realized that you had to become a person of creation.
It was almost like I felt like I didn't have control before Taylor. I was just kind of, it was the effect of everyone else. Like, it's like the victim mentality. It's like what was happening to me, all of it, what was happening to me. And then when Taylor came, it was, you couldn't sit back and say anything about what was happening to her or what was happening to me. That didn't help. It was like, what are we going to do now?
So her birth brought empowerment into your life.
Right.
I
couldn't control what happened to her, and I was terribly sad, and it was a loss that I had to grieve, having a typical child, as they say.
Right.
But I knew that just sitting back and grieving the loss wasn't going to help her.
Yes.
How do we get her better? How do we help her be everything that she could be?
Right.
So to bring everybody up to speed, in your story right now, you're 21 years old, you're still in college, and you've had your first child, who is not what people would call a typical child. She's special needs. She has CP.
And a seizure disorder.
And a seizure disorder. So here you are at 21. You've already lived as much or more life than most people probably do by the time they die. And here you are on the cusp of the beginning.
I didn't know it, but yeah.
So there you are, standing on the edge of forever. What's to come. So were you married at this point?
Yes.
So how was all that? How was the dynamic there? And you have this special needs child, you're in a relationship, and you're still going to school. Can you explain that balance a little bit?
It was a lot. I was also working. So I was working, going to school, married, a young mom of a special needs child that required therapy, and
How did she get to all her therapy and everything? I mean, you got so
Um,
much going on.
it was a mix. I mean, in the beginning, both of us, her father and I, took her whenever we could take her. Um, it was a lot of going for me and for him and for her. But we shared a lot of responsibilities in the beginning. And then I realized I was married to an addict.
Mm.
And you didn't. How long had y'all been together before the realization of that occurred?
I don't really remember when I realized that he was an addict. We had been together for about 3 years before Taylor was born, maybe. Yeah, about 3 years. And I just thought that it was typical young adult behavior, I guess. And I guess I realized after being married and having a child, it was continuing. So then I realized that it wasn't just typical young adult behavior.
Yeah.
I kind of tried to normalize it, I guess.
Do you think that in you, the normalizing of that behavior, probably maybe comes from watching that in your mother and watching that in your childhood around you?
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay.
Absolutely.
And-
I normalized it because what else do you do with it?
That's
You
exactly
either
right.
normalize it or you obsess about it.
Mhm.
And so my go-to from childhood was just to normalize it
Right.
because I had other things to focus on.
Absolutely.
I wanted to focus on Taylor. And
You had an exceptionally full life, full in every direction, full of turmoil, full of blessings, and that had to be a difficult balance. It sounds to me like if you had to put it out on a scale, like problems and benefits, you were right in the middle and the whole thing balanced on top of you, like a seesaw.
sometimes I felt like that.
It's a heavy burden to carry.
It was heavy.
Well, I'm proud of you for it.
Thank you.
That's an interesting analogy, and I think it speaks to the character of people in situations like yours. You will find that there will be one person that will typically be the fulcrum, and life will balance on them. So as your motivation went, as your mood went, as your collective understanding, talking to the doctors, getting more data, building a plan, and what have you. It sounds as though that mostly all fell to you. I mean, maybe there was a small community that would contribute some,
Mhm.
but then you began to realize the limits of their contributions,
Right.
and so then you had a choice. You had a choice moment. Like, okay, I'm either going to take all this on, and kind of operate as if I really can't rely on them, or I'm just going to quit.
I do remember times feeling like that, and I remember telling myself that you don't have the right to check out. You don't have the right to. You don't get that luxury. Not that it was really a luxury, but that's what I would tell to the people in my life. I don't get the luxury of checking
How often
out.
did they
you
they
know,
proposition you to
drinking
join them?
myself
Yes.
silly
Yes.
and taking pills? I don't get that option because I have to be here for my daughter.
Yes.
It's not an option for me,
Right.
and I never understood why it was an option for
Right.
them. Like, why do you get to drink 20 beers on a Saturday?
Yeah.
Because I still have to be a grown up.
Right.
Not that I wanted to drink 20 beers on a
No.
Saturday, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, there was no option to exercise on your part.
And it's
And-
not that I'm not saying that I wanted to or I was bitter about it or anything. It's just something inside me knew that if I didn't do it, who was going to do it?
Right.
And I'm not saying I never got help either. I did get help.
Yeah.
But I knew in the end that I could depend on very few people and myself.
Yes. So now that this growing self-reliance is coming online and really starting to mature and develop, you're still in school.
Mhm.
So you're moving, and typically people are in those types of things because if they can't verbalize it, they know somewhere out there is going to be, I'm contributing to a better opportunity. School is going to be that for me, whether you could perfectly see what that was. So if you will, kind of move that timeline forward. So now you're still in school. You have this steady participation of Taylor's care, and so where eventually did that lead to? Give us some milestone moments. Maybe it's graduation or what have you.
Right. Well, eventually with school, like I said, in the beginning, I didn't take it as serious, and I looking back now, I'm kind of disappointed with how I was. But after Taylor came and I was going to school, I started to realize this is my money, this is my time, it's my time away from my child. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. And so then I became invested in it. And it wasn't an option to, get a D or a C or even a B sometimes for me, unless it was math. But
and if it didn't get mentioned, what was your undergraduate study?
In psychology.
Okay.
And then I had a minor in English. And the more I had to do for my daughter, the more I took everything else around me seriously. And so I eventually graduated. It took longer, but I think it was in around, 2002, I think I eventually got my degree. And I had another child by then. And I decided to get my master's degree.
Okay. And what is your master's degree in?
In marriage and family therapy.
Okay. All right. So here you sit, a master's prepared professional and teaching.
Yes.
Yeah. Would you say that having had a lot of that academic preparedness along with some of the life opportunities I'll ask it in the form of an open-ended question. Do you see that having an effect as an educator, as a teacher of youngs?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Definitely.
What are some of the ways that not just the school, the academic part, but also the life experience? Are there some ways that tends to either present itself or give you an opportunity to respond to kids?
Well, I feel like my education I just have a different perspective when I look at a child because of my education. I know I'm more likely to give them like the benefit of the doubt, or I don't know. I just feel like I don't know.
You have a very positive view first when you see a child.
Yes, because I know as a child, as a 10-year-old child, I was in circumstances I couldn't help. And so I always try to look at that with my kids. Like, what is this, because I teach 10-year-olds. So I'm like, what is this 10-year-old kid going through at home?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, but I could imagine.
Sure.
And I always assume that it's got to be like, I only know the half of it.
Right.
Because I know that my teachers only knew the half of it.
Right.
And so I always assume that I only know the half of it and give them the benefit of the doubt. It may be great, but it may not be.
So that's a balance in some of the buzzwords that obviously you and I are psych trained. So some of the buzzwords is there's empathy for the child and their situation.
Yes.
There's optimism that just because they're in a difficult time, it doesn't mean they're an I can't. They're an I can. They're I can people. And now then we have to draw that out.
Right.
That's the word we use is educe. We have to educate. We have to draw out the talent that's in there because over time, that's how they're going to become overcomers.
Exactly.
And they may not have the heaviness of the story you have, but they have enough that life's tough. And at 10, they're on the cusp of becoming very aware. It's a big, bad world.
Right.
And how powerless they really are.
Exactly. They have very little control, is what I was thinking. They have very little control of their life. And so some things they might be doing in my classroom, it might not be really what's going on. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like the acting out or the saying ugly things or task avoidance or all those things. It might not be what it appears to be on the surface.
So, and now that we're in this, I know we have other topics we want to touch on. So just for a moment, though, if we have teachers that are watching, or maybe youth folks that work with youth ministry, but I think teachers will really resonate with this. So you're in a classroom, you have a kid, he or she's having a disruptive day or a moment of the day. Can you break it down? And then I may be asking a bit much, but to break it down to say, okay, here's my pattern of thought. I see it, I assess it, and I respond. Can you give us maybe just an example without calling out a child?
Yeah.
As to how you kind of handle that.
Well, I always think about that I don't want to get into a power struggle with them. I don't, because I've already lost if I get into a power struggle with them. So I don't want to get into a power struggle, and then I want to try to understand the behavior, even if it's frustrating, even if it's, it seems like it's just, people always assume that it's just defiance or it's just being difficult. But I try to always remember that my 10-year-old self and how I little control over my life.
Mm.
And my principal always tells us that kids that are loved come to school to learn, but kids that are not loved come to school to be loved.
Wow.
And
That's
that
powerful.
sticks
That
with me.
is powerful.
That sticks with me. Like
Yes.
I think of that a lot when I see a kid misbehaving, or it allows me to like restart myself. Like if I'm frustrated in the moment,
Right.
I'm like, restart.
Yes.
Remember that they're coming here to be loved.
Do you ever look at them and think of your 10-year-old self and think, there I was looking for love?
Yes, yes,
Like,
definitely.
Well, in some of our studies in psych, we studied like the hierarchy of need and those things. And to children, let's use those folks as an example, they're not going to subject themselves to the challenge of learning, whether it's paying attention, raising their hand, being vulnerable, unless some of those basic needs are met.
Exactly.
So
Some of
that's-
them are in survival mode.
Yes.
And so if you can't get them out of that in your classroom, then that's all they're going to get is
Yes.
survival mode. They're
Yes.
not going to move past that and be able to get what I'm putting down.
Exactly. And oftentimes I've told teachers, I've been privileged to do some trainings to say, using your references as examples and say, please understand it's less about your subject. It's more about developing these little humans
Yes.
to be these great adults one day. It is kind of your ministry. This is what you do, whether it's an empathetic ear or, hey, explain to Miss Martin, what did you hear me say? Or, oh, well, when they said that, how did, that kind of thing. Getting them to
Yeah.
engage.
And my principal also, when I started, he told me, he's like, I want you to focus on loving our kids and everything else will come.
Mm.
And if you love and take care of our kids, then everything else comes.
That's good leadership.
And I
it
always
really
think
is.
about that if I'm frustrated or having a, difficult day, or everyone's,
Yes.
it feels like everyone's acting out or it's just chaos in the classroom or whatever. I just think that even if I feel like I'm not doing anything that day
Mhm.
that's positive or helping someone,
Yes.
I remember I am loving them. So
That's right.
I'm doing that.
That's right.
So something's happening in here.
Yes, absolutely. It reminds me of one of our phrases we use often at the end of each day. Hey, what went well and what could go better?
Yes.
And
yes.
so we can look, and it may have to be a series of deposits. Okay, I may not see that evidence today, but I may see it by Friday.
Well, giving yourself grace too, even if you weren't
Yeah.
perfect that day,
Yeah.
tomorrow's a new day. And so
Yes.
let's just, that day's
Yes.
gone. So let's just look at the new day and start over.
Yeah.
And that's really saved me a lot.
And as your
My
principal said, they come
growth
with, yeah,
as a person is every day's a new day,
Every
and
day.
every step means something, no matter how small it is.
well, as your principal implied, they're going to still come with the same wants. They want to be loved or what they want to learn.
Yeah.
So that tomorrow's wants are still going to be there. So I get another chance.
Yeah.
Ah, I love that. That's very optimistic.
Well, I gotta say, as your husband, I'm extremely proud of you for your endeavors as a teacher and what you've become and what you poured into those kids. Now, back to the story of you, because we kind of jumped to the
Right.
present,
There's a whole
and
process
we
in
skipped
between there.
an enormous segment. You were back in 2004 or so, maybe 2003, where we jumped ahead to your present day career. So back and into your story, you had mentioned that you had now 2 kids, and that you realized that you were in a relationship with an addict, and all these things swirling around you. You realized that you were the fulcrum on which all this stuff rests, chaos coming and going from your life. In 2004, knowing your history, there was an event that changed everything. Would you mind introducing our listeners to that event and
Sure.
how it happened?
On May 28th, 2004, Taylor was diagnosed with cancer, stage 4 cancer, and that's probably that process. I'm not saying that day, but what happened in the next 17 months is probably what's defined my adult life. And the changes I've made in my adult life and the struggles and overcoming the struggles and reinventing myself, which I never thought I would do. So that she was diagnosed with cancer, and that was the most devastating event.
But it also gave way to the biggest parts of growth that you ever experienced. Not the way you would have wanted it or designed it.
But it took a long time.
It did. So if I know it's not an easy thing to talk about, and as much as you're willing, talk about how that moment happened. How did you find out that Taylor had cancer?
She had changes in her appetite, and she had started limping, but she had cerebral palsy, and she took seizure medication. So it was hard. At first they were thinking her appetite changed because of the seizure medication. They were thinking she was limping because she had spastic, which means her muscles were tight. And so they were thinking, like, maybe her muscles were tight. They tried Botox shots. They tried physical therapy. They tried all this stuff. And but no one ever felt her abdomen. And so they just kept thinking it was something to do with the cerebral palsy. And so finally they decided to do an MRI on her leg just to shut me up, I think. They really just wanted, okay, well, look at her leg.
Okay.
And so they were doing an MRI of her leg, and her father and her grandfather were there, and they were doing an MRI of her leg, and the technician came out, and he heard them say that she had a huge tumor. And they had caught the tumor, like the edge of it, when they were doing her leg. It was in her pelvis, and they caught the edge of it, and so then they moved it up, and like it quickly became this frenzy of people coming out of the room, like, we need the radiologist right now, we need and then they called me and her grandmother and said, we need you to come up here immediately. And I knew something was wrong, and I was in Florida with her grandmother. And I was on the plane phone talking. That's how long ago. There was a phone on the plane.
Right.
And I just kept, my father-in-law just kept saying, you have to come back. And I'm like, you have to tell me what's wrong. I can tell something's wrong. You have to tell me. And he finally told me they found a tumor in her abdomen. And I think me and her grandmother just sat in silence the rest of the flight. We got a taxi when we got to the airport. I don't think we said anything on the 30-minute drive, and just rushed in, and it's chaos from there.
And I know that's hard to talk about. I know it is. And I'm really proud of you for being strong and courageous and talking about it. And that process from that moment until her death, how long of a struggle was that? How long was that time period?
It was 17 months.
17 months. 17 months of agony and chaos. And
yeah, it was agony. She had every bad side effect you could have from chemo. She was sick. I think there were 6 months that she went with barely saying a word. And she was a happy, go-lucky, like, smile on her face, just a bright, shining light.
And she was 6 years old, is that right?
She was 6 years old, and she was so sick. And she had, her expressive language was, because of the cerebral palsy, was not at her age, like, not age appropriate. And so it was hard for her to express herself, but she understood everything. And so she's in this pain all the time, and it was hard for her to express to us what was going on or how she was feeling. So she just stopped talking. Like, she just sat, and she couldn't walk anymore. She lost her ability to walk. The medicine made her sick. She hated the hospital. She would cry. It was just a traumatic thing to watch after having such a happy child, to watch her go through the worst thing, and you could not help her at all.
And I personally know that Taylor was one of the greatest gifts that God ever gave to you. And she was also one of the greatest gifts God ever gave to me, because she brought me you. And I know there's a lot of people out there that have experienced grief, and they don't know where to put it, and they don't know how to deal with it, and they don't know how to compartmentalize their lives in order to keep living. And can you speak about that a little bit, about you got beyond that 17 months and lost Taylor, and that was out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
But what was left, you had control over. And it took time, and it took energy and focus and a lot of work. But you regained control of your life, Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I got to learn a lot about compartmentalizing when she had cancer, and I didn't know it at the time. Looking back, I know. But I never wanted to know statistics or any of those kind of things. I'm like, my child's not a statistic. I don't want to know. I can't hear that right now. All I need to know is how to get her better. And so that's all I focused on for 15 months is getting rid of cancer. We're getting this cancer out of her body. And we did, and she survived a surgery that she almost died. She lost like half of her blood. Her lungs filled with fluid. She got put in the ICU. She almost didn't make it. And but all I could think about is how do we get her out of here? How do we get her better? And every time she got better. And then on September 1st of 2005, she relapsed. And all I could remember them telling me was that if it came back, she was going to die. And I'm like, my child's not going to die. I wasn't having it. She's not dying. But 6 weeks later, the cancer was just everywhere, and we couldn't control it, and we just let her go. We didn't put her on life support or anything like that. We just let her go. The doctor told me she's not going to make it. I'm sorry. And this doctor fought for her. And I trusted her, and I knew when she said she's not going to make it, that she wasn't going to make it. I didn't accept it. I mean, I was probably the only one in the room when she was dying thinking, okay, she's gonna overcome this. It's not as bad as we think it is, because she always did. She was a survivor. And then we lost her, and I just went into a dark place for a really long time. Like, a dark place. I didn't think, I don't know. I didn't think I would survive it at all.
But you did.
I did.
And I've watched you grow as a person, as a woman, as a mom, over the years, and you didn't give up on yourself. And I saw that as a beautiful thing.
I went a lot of years, I would say a good 15 years being lost and like so wrapped up in depression and anxiety and PTSD and being a victim. And I'm not saying that I was a victim. What happened to me was a traumatic thing. Like, not many people know what that's like to watch your first child that made you a mother basically suffer and wither away and die, and you can't help them. There's nothing you can do to help them. And so much of who I was as a mother was because of her. Like, I had her, and she was a special needs child, and I grew up, and I had all these things. And then when she died, like, what was I supposed to do? Like, everything I was because of her. That's how I felt.
Sure.
And so it was very easy to just, some days I couldn't get out of bed. Like, I couldn't function. I was just so caught up in it's not fair. Just the victim thinking. And it took me a lot of years to get out of that thinking. People were cruel. They were mean. They were judgmental. I was hard on myself. I beat myself up at every turn. I said I was a bad mother, a bad wife, a bad friend, a bad daughter. All of those things. I was just, and it was, everything bad was my fault. And I just like spiraled into this just dark place. That's all I can explain it. Just dark place. I didn't want to be around people. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to talk to people. Nothing. I just wanted to be left alone.
I've noticed through the years that anything we engage in, it's going to have, I call it an over-under. Mm-hmm. And the overt would be likely a lot of the aspiring attitude that you have going into her CP, going into her diagnosis, going into her treatment, and the overt being the positive, like, I can do this, I can respond, let's learn, okay, let's read on this, let's keep growing and helping. And for 6+ years, it gave her a quality of life, until we had this invader in her body that unfortunately was more powerful than what her body could handle. Right. But that's the under, is if there's going to be a positive, there's a negative. If there is an order, there's a chaos. You can't have one without the other.
Right.
And sometimes the under wins the day, and it does have that devastating effect. And I know there's folks listening. They're like, I am either there or similarly there.
Right.
Me and my spouse have a special need, and they are our identity.
Right.
This is every day is about them by and large. And and I think being young and what have you. Now, likely if you were to counsel, since you have those skills, if you were to counsel, say, a young family in their early 20s, and this gets born into their life one way or another, is there anything you might tell them so that if things don't go well, or if they find themselves kind of locked into a limit of growth, okay, now they've come to realize their child's only going to be so much.
Right.
And what can they do maybe from a self-care perspective that you kind of had to, for 15 years, had to rediscover all of that?
Right.
Which implies to me it was there. It was just so small, but you resuscitated it through the help of Robbie and others to bring it back to life. But is there some language you can tell them now to say, hey, if you do find yourself there, pay attention to some of these things? Because and one of the things I often tell folks, because I can't give you what I don't have.
Right.
I can only give you what I do have. So, is there some words you'd like to put on that encouragement?
Well, I say that my whole existence was her, because when she died, that's what I felt like. Like, I felt like my whole existence was her, and now she's gone. What am I supposed to do? But I also know that during that time before she got cancer, that I did do self-care. That I did, we would have like scrapbooking weekends, and it was so important for me to be the mom I needed to be to her, to do those things, to have those moments of where I just took the time away, just step back and like, you're not just a mom. You're not just a mom of a special needs child. You're not just, a wife. You're not just those things. You're other things too. And that's where my schooling came in, and my time with friends. Like, I made very dear friends that also had special needs children.
Okay.
So it's almost like we had a support system of women that said, we're going to go hard for these kids. Don't be confused.
And for each other.
Yes, we are going to do, but we're also going to take the time to love ourselves and just be us. Like, go drop our kids off at school and go meet at the bagel shop and just talk, or go to, my friend had a ranch in Brenham, go to the ranch and just scrapbook our hearts out and eat birthday cake for dinner, and just all those things that didn't mean that we would just step back and just take some time off from, it would just be a day or two, but it was enough to recharge us and give us that passion and energy to come back and do what we did for our kids.
You learned how to not be serious all the time.
Yes. But when she died, I think I lost that.
Yeah, and I don't know that would be a misunderstanding for anybody that's been through something heavy like that. We don't go into those efforts to lose. We go in to win. Right. And unfortunately, sometimes nature is bigger than what we can. That we can't turn it around. We can't make it stop. No. And
it just happens.
Sometimes the game is rigged.
Sometimes the game is rigged, and we don't really even know the reasons, and we may not know them for 15 years.
I still don't know the reason, but I've learned that I won't understand the reason. And if I get caught up in trying to understand the reason, then I'm just in that dark place.
Back in the dark.
Like, I'm just in the bitterness, the angry.
Like a loop.
The anger, the darkness. That's where that keeps me if I stay in the why did this happen, because I'm not going to know why.
Correct.
I'm never going to understand why. I've gone to preachers, pastors, tell me why. And every time they don't have a why.
That's right.
Sometimes they come back with they try, but if I keep on, they're left with the, I don't know why. And so I feel like it was a turning point for me when I stopped looking for why.
Okay.
Because there was no answer to that.
That's profound.
That is profound. That is powerful to basically discipline yourself to say, okay, I will no longer ask that question.
Because it doesn't fix anything. Understanding why do you think it's going to make it okay that my child is dead?
Right.
No, it's not going to make it okay. So why are you looking for this answer? Why are you And I would do the what if thing, like, what if I did this different? What if I did this? And I finally just said one day, the what ifs are melting my brain.
Yes.
I know that sounds so silly, but
Yes.
they were. I mean, it was really like paralyzing me to do what if or why did she deserve this? She was such a perfect person. She was pure. She was innocent. Why did she deserve this? And being angry at God and angry at the situation. And then I just realized one day that wasn't helping me. It was just keeping me in this dark and bitter place.
Right.
And it was almost like I was comfortable there. Like,
Yes.
I didn't have to answer to anything or anyone. I could just go back into my dark place. And you don't understand me anyway, so just leave me alone. And
it became your own form of a defense mechanism.
yes. And it was very toxic to myself. Very toxic. But it was just my cocoon. It was like where I lived.
So you found empowerment through the disconnect of your place of comfort, where you were comfortable in your doubts, in your disbelief, in your questioning. So you disconnected from that and became empowered by that disconnection.
I think so.
So you used the question "What if," which is one of our mantras that we use. Yeah, that's
that
perfect.
is interesting.
It is. Well, and I'll say this as just being when we're friends and as knowing a lot of these things. It's like we didn't take the "what if" out of the language. We just stopped applying it there.
Yes,
we just
that's definitely true. Like, I started like, well, what if?
Well, there's a double-sided coin there.
There it
The
is.
what if has two sides.
Yeah.
It's got the good side and the negative side. The positive.
Well,
over under.
I do use what if now, but I don't use it that way.
Yes.
I went through 15 years of, it wasn't just Taylor's death. There were just so many things that happened to me during that 15 years, and I just let it push me further and further down into the hole. Like, I kind of got to the point where waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that's such a negative way to think, but it's like when it happens, like, oh, I was right.
Yeah.
You know, I knew something bad was going to happen. I can't get comfortable because I know something bad's going to happen. And it was like this whole, like, just thinking myself into just negativity all the time.
And we find this amazing thing to be true, that you'll always find what you're looking for.
Yes, you will.
If you're looking for the bad, guess what? Get ready, because it's coming.
It's coming.
And I don't know exactly the moment when. That's not true. I do know. I just woke up one day and I realized I can't control anyone. And see, I should know that from going to school, that's like what you learn. You can't control anyone but yourself. And I, for so long, was trying to control everything around me. And it just made everything worse and made me go into the darker place. And then one day I just woke up and I was like, I can't control anyone but me. Like, I can't control anyone but me.
Yes.
And yes, what happened to me is terrible. And yes, in ways that makes me a victim of life, because that is a horrible thing to happen for
Absolutely.
your daughter to die of cancer. It's a horrible thing to happen. But then I started looking at, well, what if I did something different? Like, what if I did something different? And then I started thinking about Taylor. And people told me this for years. Is this how she would want you to live? Well, no, it's not. But are you helping me by saying that? No, they weren't. They weren't helping me by saying it, because I wasn't ready to hear it. Like, I was not ready to hear, oh, well, would Taylor want you to be like this? Or, well, what about your other kids? Or, you know, what about just anything? Like, people would say the cruelest things, and I don't think they meant to be cruel. They just would say stuff trying to help, and it would be cruel. And then there were other people that would just basically say cruel things. Just, you know, you're so depressing to be around, and you need to get over it, and, you know, just mean things that I let push me down. And so one day I was like, and I'd been thinking about being a teacher for probably 10 years. It was ridiculous the amount of time I wasted in this place that I was. But if I didn't go to that place, I wouldn't be who I am now.
Right.
And so one day I'm like, well, what if you just called the place because, you know, I have a degree in psychology, so I don't have a teaching degree. So I'm like, what if you just called the place or emailed the place and asked them, what do I have to do to become a teacher with a bachelor's degree in Texas? And so that was my first step. I just emailed them and I asked them, what do I have to do?
Yeah.
And so then they sent me back what I had to do. And I'm like, okay, well, what if I took it a step further and like went to the place for the interview like they suggested? And so that's kind of how I did it. It started with, instead of thinking all the way forward with the what if I just start right here in this one spot? And that's my, success for the day is I got up out of bed, I took a shower, I got dressed, and I emailed Region 5 to see what I needed
That's
to do.
beautiful. You took the smallest activity
sounds
that you
silly,
could find
but-
in the direction you wanted to go, and that was a part of your cure.
Right.
Like,
one
The
step
one
on the
step.
road.
The
Yeah.
one step.
And I let me be
Yes.
proud of myself for that one
Yes.
thing. I didn't care if
Good.
anyone else was proud of me. I didn't even, and I probably went back to bed that day after I did it and probably started beating myself up because I was going back to bed. But that one little thing started this momentum. And then I started to think, what would Taylor want me to do? Like, what can I do to make her proud of me? And that's when my life changed. And I didn't get there by someone shaming me into it and being mean to me and judging me. I got there because one day I woke up and said, how can I change me? Because that's all I can change.
On the subject, if I may, of moving forward from great loss, I do these grief classes. I've been doing them for a couple of decades. And very early on, I stopped asking, who did you lose? And I started asking, who are you here to honor? And
That is amazing because that language is powerful.
Yes.
Because I wasn't in that language for so
Yes.
long. I did not think, who am I here to honor? I thought who I lost because it was such a great loss. And that was my focus, is that I lost her, and it was a traumatic loss, and it's not fair, and she was my daughter, and
all those are truths.
and I was angry, and it was fair to be angry, but I just got so lost in it that I paralyzed myself.
And how easy is that to do? I mean, be soft on yourself, because that's not an uncommon or, unique experience in that situation. That's normal.
Very.
Totally normal.
I like that you asked, and you kind of alluded to it just a few moments ago, you did ask the follow-up questions. After we asked who, and we asked now, how am I going to honor them?
Yes.
And like you said, it took a while. The seed to the answer to that question was actually already in there, because the idea of being a teacher didn't come out of nowhere. It was already there.
But I know that I ended up losing my way as being because I went to school to be a therapist, and I ended up losing my way in that dark place because I'm like, what kind of therapist can I be? Am I going to be able to be empathetic? Am I going to be able? I can't even get out of bed. How am I going to help anyone?
The real question
so I
is, would you
kinda
have ever
got off
found
that.
joy being a therapist?
I don't know. I not at that time, probably not.
How about
But-
I have a better question? Are you a therapist now?
Kind of.
15
Yeah.
years old.
Yeah,
So
I am.
you prayed
And
to
it's a
God, and
different
God
kind-
delivered you.
Yeah,
That's
it's
right.
a different kind. And when I was doing my internship, I did my internship with just children. Like, I only worked with children.
That's amazing.
And that's when I kind of found my way that, okay, and they were most of them were in that age group of 5th grade.
Oh.
Like, they were older and they were younger, but I figured out that I loved working with 10, 11, 9-year-olds. And I don't know why. It's like right before this crucial stage.
Strange coincidence, right?
Yeah, but I love working with them. And then that's how I thought of the teaching came to me. But I still just sat on it for years and didn't do anything because I thought I would fail.
Yeah.
And so I just was in my dark little place, I'm not going to do that. Because I
Earlier-
don't want anyone to depend on me to be there every day. So I'm just
Right.
going to live in my little shell. And
Earlier
about
I
it.
mentioned that change of seasons and the storm, and we live in a region of the country where we get just terrific storms through here when we're going from winter to spring to summer. So the bad weather was pushing out. It was slow,
It was very
and you
slow.
give yourself grace and credit for that. Like, it took a while, but it was happening. And now look at you. Yeah.
Well, I feel like when I took those first steps to get my certification for teaching, that's kind of when my life turned around. And even when I was in the program, I struggled. I missed class, and then it'd be like, okay, you've missed all the classes you can miss. If you miss another class, you're going to have to retake the program. And so I had my struggles. Like, I was like, I can't do this. I'm not going to be able to. I mean, I was so hard on myself. No one could beat me up more than I beat myself up. But then I started having like successes. Like, I started getting through parts of the program, and it'd be like, okay, that's your last class for that. And I'm like, oh, wow. And then it was time to take practice tests, and I would get all worked up. I don't want to take practice tests. And then I took practice tests, and they're like, okay, now you can go take the real test. And so I took the real test, and I started passing those. And then I got a job offer, and because the teacher resigned, and I got a job offer after I took my tests, but before I'd applied for my license. And so it just kind of all started falling into place. And so then I started to feel like, almost like it was confirmation of what I was supposed to be doing, because everything started falling into place. And then I got a job as a teacher, and that's when my life was changed. Like, it completely changed my life and who I was, the way I thought. I finally was able to think about honoring Taylor instead of just losing her. How am I honoring her? I'm coming here every day and, teaching 62 kids and honoring her every day. That's all. Every time I get sad about her now, I just think about the ways that I can honor her.
And no doubts that even in her short, less than 8 years, the character that she brought into your life is coming out.
Yes,
Yes.
it is. And I finally found a place where I can let it and not be sad or feel guilty. I always felt guilty, and I didn't even know why. I understand now why, but I can do it in a way where I don't feel sad or feel guilty. I mean, don't get me wrong, I feel sad still on days, because I miss her, and I'll never be okay with her dying. Never. It's never going to be okay with me. But all I can do, I can't bring her back. And so all I can do now is honor her and make her proud of me, and just changing that mindset of being a victim to a survivor. It changed my life.
In addition to the honor statement that I used for the very first class, somewhere after they kind of warm it up to me a little bit, I'll say, okay, now I'm going to drop this on you, and just to let it kind of soak in. They're like, okay. I said, yeah, and I just do it like a blunt. I said, you're never going to stop grieving. And you can see I said, but here's the reason, because your measure of grief and your measure of love are equal. So thus, you don't want to stop grieving, because you'll never stop loving.
Telling people that is so valuable, because I don't think enough people told me that, or I didn't hear it.
Yeah.
And no one ever told me that it was normal to feel the way that I felt, or I didn't hear it. I won't say that no one told me, because you sitting here, you know that you probably told me that, but I didn't hear it. Yeah. And so I was so hard on myself. And now I hear when someone says, like, my friends at school have been one of my biggest blessings, because they all love me and they tell me, grieving is normal, and we're proud of you. And it's just been such a different experience having, God had to have placed me at that school with those people, because those people have changed my mindset, in that it's okay to feel the way I do, but it's also okay to be happy. And,
absolutely.
And that's how I found my, just how to honor her. And one day I'm just at school, and I realized I'm here honoring her. Like, it just hit me. I wasn't thinking that when I went to be a teacher. It's just, it came to me through the help of my different way of thinking and my friends telling me, look at what you're doing in her memory now.
That's twice you've referenced the value of community. First was your group of friends with special needs. And the neat thing about, and then now your teachers, the neat thing about having, I'll use the special needs mother friends as a group. We can get together and we can talk about anything and everything other than our children. And because we all kind of know it's there, but but there's like a confidence, like, you get me, you understand me, you know what I'm thinking behind these eyes. Now let's go eat cake for supper, and talk about silly books and stories, because no one is here ignoring our truth. We're able to embrace our truth a little better, and still have a little bit of real life. It sounds like you found that again in your teacher.
Yes, I have, because I can have on the anniversary of her death, I can have a day where I'm just not feeling it, and I'm a little teary, and I can go cry to them, and then 10 minutes later we're laughing and talking, and and they're okay with it. They think it's normal, and they tell me how amazing I am and that I've, done great things in her honor. And it's just a totally different language that and maybe it was there before, I just didn't hear it, but I just heard the negative. But now I don't hear the negative.
Yes,
if they even start in, I'm like, no, you don't know what you're saying.
But you're telling people today on this show that if you're hearing those things, it's not true.
No,
that's not the
it's
way
not.
it is.
You need to distance yourself from that.
Find a new
And
community.
even if you're the only one cheering yourself on, take that first step.
Yeah.
Do that email like I did, or whatever it is. Get up, take a shower, get dressed, and
Take action.
take out the garbage. If
Yes.
it's the tiniest little thing, be like, I
Right.
took out the garbage today. I mean,
And
it sounds silly, but
No.
it starts a momentum, and before you know it, you're 3 years down the road, and you're like, wow, like 3 years ago where I was, and then where I am now, it's like I don't even know her anymore.
Right.
Like people that I haven't seen in years, like talk about something. I'm like, I don't know her anymore. I don't know who she is.
Wow. And that always leaves me with, and then imagine where we'll be 3 years from now.
Exactly.
You mentioned something just a moment ago about measuring these accomplishments. That too is one of every night at the end of my class, I say, now in the next week, find 2 or more things that you can take all the way to completion and account for that. Give yourself an attaboy, give yourself an attagirl. And they're looking, I said, fold clothes, wash dishes, it all counts. Now, it's a little bitty drop, but
And
it counts.
also, it allows you to get out of that thinking, because that was a hard thing for me, is to get away from my thinking. And when I'm at school, I don't have time for that. If I'm going to love my kids, I don't have time to go there. And that was a blessing for me.
Yes.
Now I don't have to think that way. I don't have to, it just is automatic now. But when I first started working at school, I'm like, how did I not do this 10 years ago? It was like what I needed. I just didn't look for it.
Right. Well,
I just
and
got
hope-
stuck in the negativity and let life beat me down, and just I was just a victim, and I didn't see that I could have an influence like I have now.
the words that we often use, and Rob used it earlier, is owner creators.
Yes.
I became an owner of me, and then I started creating something, which is that first email.
Yeah.
And that's an example of creation. And we think it's creating orbit planets in the universe. No, I can create myself, to become something.
Exactly.
And I
And
know
that
there
new-
are folks listening.
And that new way of thinking created this person that, like, if I do have a bad day and I do go to bed and I do feel bad, I also know that tomorrow's a new day. And I, give myself that leeway. Okay, it was just a bad day. We're going to get up tomorrow. We're going to start over. And that changed life for me, because starting a new day over again, not like in my head, okay, yesterday's gone, today's a new day.
Yes.
And I never did that before. I've carried it all around, and it was so heavy, and I don't do that anymore. Like, even if I have a bad day, tomorrow's a new day, and I'm getting up at 5:30 and I'm going to work, and it's almost like I don't want to miss work now. I don't want to miss life now. I don't want to. Yeah, sometimes I need that calm, peace, and quiet, but it's no longer like where I live.
We can call that weekends in summers, because you're a
Yes.
teacher.
Yes.
Well, I want to say that you have far surpassed what I hoped for today in bringing you on the show. And I can say with the utmost sincerity that you have been my favorite guest. And you will
better be.
always be my favorite guest. And I've got just a couple of things. I've got one comment, and then I've got 2 questions, okay? And we're going to wrap this up for the sake of time. But you've done amazing. I want you to hear that. And then I want to suggest, is it possible that you see these 62 kids a day, right? And this is your 3rd year, unless my math is wrong.
No, it's okay.
3rd year. So 62 kids a day in your 3rd year, and you don't have any end in sight. You're not shooting to shut it down or retire
No.
anytime soon. So these 62 kids a day, you have spread a part of Taylor into them. And she reflects to you from them. And that's beautiful.
That's huge to me. I mean, just here, and I don't remember the first person that said it to me, but it was someone at school. They said it to me, and it changed the way I think. And they probably have no idea of what what they did for me, but
Right.
it's just, and maybe people tried to do that before, like I said. I just didn't hear it, but I was finally in a place where I could hear it.
Good. Well, I'm proud of you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the two questions. Number one, what advice would you have for someone? Now, this is a big one because you've covered so many different angles and facets of the human existence, especially for a woman, all the things you've been through. But what advice would you have for someone who is in the stages of grief, who has lost a child? What advice would you have for them?
Oh, there's so much, but I guess for me, I would say be careful getting consumed. It's okay to grieve. It's normal to grieve. You're going to be angry. But for me, turning it around, like you said, to the honoring of them has been a really big thing. And I don't get caught in it for 15 years like I did. It's not, I mean, love your child, grieve for your child, but find ways to honor them, even if it's small ways, because eventually it's going to, keep the momentum. You're going to keep looking for ways. And before you know it, I feel like I went from the negativity and the loss to how do I honor? How do I honor? Because that's all I can do. I can't bring her back. And so, yes, it's unfair. Yes, there's no excuse for it. You're never going to find why. You're never going to make sense of it. Maybe some people do, but I think that you never will. You'll never be okay with your child dying. You'll never understand it. But you have to turn your thinking around. You have to. And no one else can help you. No one can help you. You have to help yourself. And you have to want to help yourself. And you can't let what anyone else says or think about you influence you. You have to say, I can change me. Here's what I could do. You have to take responsibility. No one is going to save you. No one.
Right.
You have to save yourself. And you don't have to stop, missing your kid. You don't have to be okay with it. You don't have to stop crying or any of those kind of things, but you just have to change the way you think and think, I put all that energy into her, and is it really okay to just sit here and die? Because that's basically what I was doing. I mean, I was just sitting there.
Worse than that, you were living in death.
Yeah, and my body, I wasn't healthy. I wasn't, my thyroid, my adrenal glands, nothing was functioning properly. I was just dying. And is that really a way to live? I mean, do you really want her? I mean, what if she can see you? Do you really want her to see that? Do you really want, to think all that we did to invest in her, and then you just die when she dies? And in a way, she died. Like her memory dies. If you're like that, you're not spreading anything about her.
So, would it be fair to say, don't get stuck in it? Move through it. Stay moving.
I want to be careful because I don't want to sound judgmental.
Exactly.
Like stop it, because it's not easy. When people tell you stop it, you just feel you beat yourself up more because you're like, I feel like I can't stop it. So I don't want to say, in a mean way.
Right.
I don't want to say stop getting stuck in it. I want to say
don't be
there
still.
is a way out of it.
Yes.
There is a way out of it.
Yes.
Yes, you're going to hurt. Yes, you're always going to want them.
Right.
But there is a way out.
Yes.
So
Don't
keep hope
give up. Keep hope.
for yourself.
But if you're stuck in it, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you.
Right.
It just means that you have to find it in yourself. No
Keep
one's going to find
looking.
it for you.
Yes.
But it's in there. It's got to be in there. If I found it after 15 years, it's got to be in there.
That was beautiful, and I don't want to take from that, but there's been times doing this class. Sometimes I've had sponsors. Lately, I don't. We just do it because it's our own little ministry. And somebody asked me one time. They said, they asked me a reason. Well, what's the reason you keep going? And the only one I could think of, and I think you'll relate to it, is I thought of my grandmothers. Both of them were Gold Star moms. And if you don't know what a Gold Star moms is, they sent their sons off to war and they didn't come back. Their oldest sons, and somehow they got through.
Mm-hmm.
And now I interview my mom who looks at her mom and others, and they will speak to years. Like there were years that I know that it was like they were in a fog. They could see, but they couldn't see far, but they kept moving because they know somewhere on the other end of that is going to, and then eventually, I'm sure it's great. Now you're a grandmother, grandchildren come around, and I'm sure we were a breath of life, but they always kept finding an evidence of life. So
And you have to do that. You can't stop looking because you're going to get stuck if you stop looking.
So I tell these folks, I said, so if you want to look back at your grandmothers, how did they do it? I don't know, but they did. But I bet if you stopped and thought, you know how they did it. And that's what you're evidence of. We can look back at generations and go, well, those awesome women got through it. Of course I can too. So.
Right.
So I said there was 2 questions. There were, but another one popped up, and I'm going to ask you these, and we're gonna have to wrap it up. But are you a success?
Absolutely.
I love it. That is amazing. That is amazing. Thank you for that answer.
I wouldn't have said that 3 years ago.
I believe that, but I also agree with the answer you gave. You are a success in my book. Now, this is a question that I ask every guest on this show, regardless of their background, their where they are now, and where they think they're going. They get this question. So if you could go back in time and you could talk to yourself before you started college or right at the beginning, and you could only just give yourself a message that you would hear. All you could do is give yourself a message. You can't do anything else, but that message will be heard. What would that message be?
I already know.
What?
You can only control yourself. I spent so many years of my life trying to control my situation that I was in, whether it be with addicts, whether it be cerebral palsy, cancer, infidelity, all of these things that I've been through in my life. I learned, the turning point for me was learning that you can only control yourself. If they're going to go off and act crazy, then they got to go off and act crazy by themselves.
Nice.
You've got to invest in yourself because you're the only one that's going to do it. And if you try to keep yourself in the chaos and the craziness, you're just going to keep yourself down.
So you keep being your best you and let the world do what they're going to do.
All you can do is control yourself.
That's beautiful.
That's it.
That's great advice, Chuck. Is there anything you got in closing?
No, I'm just so proud of you. I've known you for years, and yeah, there were.
You've been on this journey for me for the 17 years that I've been on it.
Yeah, and there was always moments of hope, and I think me as your friend and Robbie as we knew it was coming, but you embraced it. You took control of what you can control, and look at you. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, everybody, I'm Robbie.
I'm Chuck.
And this is Denise. And she will always be my favorite guest on this show. And we appreciate all of you making us a part of the pursuit of your purpose.